They weren't looking at a seasoned fighter. They were staring at ink. Too much of it. Too scattered, too strange. And that alone made them snicker, whisper, circling her like sharks nudging at a ripple. One guy finally tossed out, "What's with all the tattoos, sweetheart? Run out of skin or running from something?" They had no clue what they were poking at. Those marks weren't decoration. They were chapters, blood, mistakes, survival. And long before they understood who she actually was, what she'd carried, what she'd led, and what those lines carved into her skin truly tracked, the damage was done. Before we show you the moment the room froze, and the truth behind that kid's sketch, one Marine tossed out a cheap jab. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Tap like if you respect quiet strength. Subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story from Major Tom's Tales. Because today's reminder is simple. Respect doesn't come from noise. It comes from what someone shoulders in silence. The training hall looked plain from outside. Tan blocks, buzzing lights, an American flag sagging between dusty whiteboards. Inside, though, it was packed. 40 recruits, raiders, rangers, baby SEALs, a couple Air Force controllers, jammed together on metal benches, all mid-20s and built out of protein shakes and ego. The types who could ace a PT test half asleep and wore the attitude to prove it. They'd shown up for a Joint Forces seminar, some cross-branch survival lab led by someone with experience, whatever that meant. Since the real instructors hadn't arrived, the place dissolved into trash talk, bets, and the usual posturing. That's when Rowan noticed her. Dead center seat, second row, small frame, tight shoulders, no rank patch, just a black PT shirt. She hadn't said a word since walking in, head slightly lowered as she tightened a bootlace, steady, deliberate. But the tattoos drew every eye. They wrapped both arms like creeping vines, heavy lines, sharp angles, fading foreign symbols, star maps, and rough strokes that looked almost seared into place. No pretty designs, no artsy motive, just a chaotic tangle. Harsh, strange, excessive. Rowan nudged his buddy with a grin. "Looks like a sticker book." Someone behind him snorted. "She lose a bet?" Another whispered, "Walking graffiti." Rowan couldn't resist. He leaned forward, tapped her shoulder, and said loud enough to silence the chatter, "Hey, sweetheart, what's with all the ink? Run out of room or running from something?" Laughter rippled. Heads turned. She paused but didn't fully face him. Her chin lifted a fraction, her voice cool and steady. "You don't know what you're looking at," Rowan blinked. "Oh, I know a bad tattoo job when I see one." This time, the room didn't laugh. Not immediately. Something in the way she glanced back, brief, still, shifted the air. Not anger, not fear, just contained. She slid her sleeve down a bit, hiding a few of the boulder marks. Not out of shame, but like someone quietly sliding a blade back into its sheath. The room tightened. Subtle but real. No instructors yet, no authority. Just wolves in a pen trying to read each other. Rowan leaned back, smug, convinced he'd scored the win. The others weren't nearly as sure. She stayed right where she was, palms resting lightly on her knees, eyes fixed forward. Then the door creaked open, and a sharp, clipped command sliced through the noise. "On your feet." Conversation died instantly. Benches scraped as everyone stood in unison. A Marine gunnery sergeant, Dalton, stepped inside, clipboard in hand and the kind of walk that suggested he'd buried more men than most of them had ever saluted. He didn't bother with introductions. "This isn't a pep talk," he said flatly. "It's not a TED Talk either. This is a practical assessment. You're not here to be impressed. You're here to learn." He paced the front row, eyes scanning the crowd like counting rifles before a breach. 3 drills, he continued. Physical, cognitive, tactical. Fast, quiet, no questions. His gaze swept the room once more before he jabbed a finger. "You, step forward." Petra Vale rose instantly, No hesitation, no grunt, just a clean, efficient movement. Even her boots stayed silent. Behind her, Rowan smirked. "Watch her fold," he muttered. Dalton led her to the corner, where a 180-pound dummy lay face down on the mat. "Drag it to the wall. Full kit." She didn't react, didn't puff up, just quick hands buckling straps and rigging gear. Then she dropped low, hooked the harness, and started pulling. No dramatic show of strength, no growl, just steady, mechanical power. Heel over heel, she moved, calm and unreadable, reaching the wall in half the time the previous recruit had managed. No applause, no commentary. "Reset," Dalton barked. Then came the headset and the digital panel. Static roared, alarms blared, engines screamed, and the timer kicked on. A rotating puzzle lit up. Logic, memory, pattern. She never flinched. While others had jerked or blinked, her eyes stayed fixed, fingers tapping through each sequence until, at 90 seconds, the screen flashed green. Done. Rowan leaned forward, frown forming. "Last one," Dalton said. He tapped his tablet, bringing up drone footage of a mock village. "Find the entry flaw. 60 seconds." She stood still for a moment, then spoke. "Northwest Trail. Overgrown. Tire depressions uneven. Not a patrol. Flanking element. Main entry's a distraction." Dalton stared, then gave a slow nod. No praise, no reaction. She simply walked back to her seat, not acknowledging anyone. Rowan leaned toward his buddy, whispering, "She thinks she's special forces or something." Without turning, she answered, "I don't think anything. I know what I've done." Dalton paused mid-note at that, just for a second, before continuing. But the room didn't miss the look on his face. Breaks at places like this aren't real breaks. They're observation windows, where how you relax says as much as how you stand. The recruits drifted into the gravel area outside the hall. Bleachers sagging under an old awning, canteens hissing open, gloves coming off, laughter seeping back in like a slow draft. She sat alone. No one pushed her away. She just didn't join a group, didn't chase conversation, didn't hover for approval. She didn't need to. She knelt beside her ruck, rewrapping the gauze on her palms from the drag drill. Her movements small and exact. Every gesture efficient, like repetition had carved out anything unnecessary long ago. Across the gravel, Rowan spotted her. Still stinging from being shown up and unable to reconcile what he'd just witnessed, he decided to push again. A recruit's pride never retreats quietly. He motioned for Lopez and Cade to follow, and the three of them drifted toward her, forming a loose circle that pretended to be casual, but wasn't. Rowan dropped onto the bench next to her. "So," he said, tone playful, "all those tattoos, bad choices or messy breakups?" She didn't even look at him. "They're not your business." Lopez leaned against the railing behind her. "Come on, every tattoo's a story. Give us one," Cade smirked. "Or maybe she's just a poser. No unit tags, nothing real. Just doodles." She kept wrapping her hand, letting silence stretch thin. Rowan gestured toward the jagged lines under her elbow. "This one," he said, tapping lightly. "Looks like a kid scribbled it with a crayon." Her reaction was instant, quicker than any of them expected. She didn't hit him or threaten. She simply closed her fingers around his wrist, grip tight and cold. Not aggressive, but absolute. A boundary drawn with no theatrics. "Don't touch me," she said. Rowan froze. She released him within a second and resumed wrapping her palm as if nothing had happened. The air shifted around them. Cade gave a shaky laugh. "She's feisty." No one echoed it. There was no tension in her body, no defensiveness. And somehow, that made the moment heavier. Before it escalated, the heavy door groaned open. "Back inside," Gunnery Sergeant Dalton barked. The three men drifted away with forced ease. Rowan lingered a heartbeat longer, glancing at her as she rose and slung her pack over one shoulder. He assumed he'd rattled her. He didn't recognize the stillness for what it truly was. Not fear, not defeat, but discipline. The kind forged, not taught. The kind that waits. The recruits shuffled back in with less swagger. Water bottles cracked open. Boots scraped concrete. A few muttered about the heat. She was already seated. Same place, same posture, same unreadable expression. Then the door opened again. This time it wasn't a sergeant. A man in service khakis entered. Mid-50s, silver buzzcut, jaw like carved stone. The kind of presence that made a room straighten without being told. He stepped in, with quiet authority. Commander Rourke. "Carry on," he said, waving off their attempt to stand. The recruits stayed seated, but more upright now, even Rowan drawing his knees in. Rourke didn't speak immediately. He scanned the room like he already knew each name and file. His eyes moved row by row until they settled on her. A faint shift crossed his face. Not surprise, but recognition. He offered her a short, respectful nod before turning back to the room. "Today isn't about tactics," he began. "It's not about drills. It's about what happens when everything fails. When comms die, GPS burns out, and your backup is 20 clicks away with no way to reach you." He paused. "Today is about endurance. Mental, tactical, moral." He glanced toward her again, then stepped aside. "You'll be led by someone who didn't read this in a manual. She wrote the manual." A hush fell over the room. He faced her directly. Chief Petra Vale, retired. The air thickened. She stood, slow, steady, no theatrics. Rowan's jaw tightened, a knot forming in his gut. Not quite shame yet, but something close. Vale gave Rourke a small nod, and he returned it with something near deference. Rourke continued addressing the frozen room. "Chief Vale served 17 years in Naval Special Warfare, Task Unit Echo, Joint Stag Elements. Forward recon with Task Force Blue's escape cadre." He let it sink in. "Decorated for valor during Operation Red Camel. She'd trained everyone from SEAL Team 2 to the British SPS, one of the rare Tier C instructors cleared for live combat protocols." Rowan's gaze drifted down to her forearm. The same mark he'd mocked, the one he'd dismissed as a child's doodle. Now he saw it differently. He didn't understand it yet, but he finally sensed just how badly he'd misjudged her. Petra Vale scanned the room, her voice steady and quiet as she said, "Let's begin." She didn't pace or gesture wildly when she taught. She didn't need screens or volume. She simply stood in the center, arms folded, letting silence communicate more than shouting ever could. And somehow, the entire room leaned in. Rowan stayed frozen where he sat. Ever since she'd said her name, the sarcasm had drained out of him, replaced by a rising heat creeping up his neck. He stared at the floor, but he couldn't escape it. The faded, jagged ink he'd touched earlier. The one he'd called childish. Petra stepped toward his row, not to confront him, but to explain. She lifted her forearm slightly, exposing the rough black lines smeared by time, curves that looked like part of a map someone sketched while stumbling. "You called this one ugly," she said softly. "You were right." Rowan looked up. "It was charcoal," she continued, "scratched in with a field knife on day 3 of a hostage rescue in a coastal village in southern Luzon. We landed during a monsoon. Saltwater wrecked our radios. GPS burned out. The local guide drew a map by memory, hands shaking so hard he could barely hold the pencil." She paused. "We lost him within the hour. Mortars leveled half a ridge." Her eyes stayed steady. "After that, all I had were my boots and the picture in my head. I burned the map to protect his family, but I remembered every turn." She tapped the ink. "So I carved it here. Every fork, every dead end, every flooded canal, so I wouldn't loop my team in circles. We moved in blackout, mud up to our knees, wading through water that stank of gas and blood." She lowered her arm. And we got all 3 hostages out. 1 wounded, all alive. Pulled them through a rice field under indirect fire, and not one of my people died. Rowan stared down again. Petra looked around the room, not proud, not accusing, just stating truth. Ugly ink saved 6 lives that night, she said. Keep your lion heads and flag sleeves. I'll take the crooked lines drawn by people who wanted to live. The room went silent. Not worshipful, just heavy with understanding. She walked back to the front, folded her arms again. The projector flicked to a new slide, but no one cared. Their focus stayed on her and the ink that wasn't there to impress anyone. Petra cleared her throat. Let's talk fallback structure, she said. Not the kind you plan. The kind you improvise when the map's gone and the plan's ash. She turned to adjust the panel, and that's when they saw it. A cluster of symbols peeking from beneath her collar on her left shoulder blade. Dark, angular, faded with time. The room shifted again. She noticed their eyes and spoke without turning. That one was never meant to be seen. Her fingers brushed the ink gently, like memory lived inside the lines. Kurdistan, 2014. The room held still. We were on overwatch for a failed extraction. Our outpost got shelled 2 hours before the handoff. Humvee rolled into a dry creek bed. I crawled out with a dislocated shoulder. Her voice stayed calm, eyes fixed ahead on something only she could see. We fought 19 hours. No air support, no drone feed, just rooftops and shadows. My comms were dead. The rest of the team had pulled back to a ridge, assuming we didn't make it. She inhaled slowly. I carried a teammate 5 miles over rough ground. He'd taken a round through the thigh, drifting in and out. I used his blood to mark fallback points on my uniform. When I reached the halfway ridge, I carved the same pattern into my skin. She tapped the shoulder ink. That's what you're looking at. Every shape is a fallback grid. Bends, trees, bodies we passed. Lopez blinked hard, the swagger draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. Petra kept going, voice steady. I didn't mark those to honor anyone. I marked them so I'd never forget where I lost control, where I held, where I failed, where I crawled. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was impact, settling deep into the room. The silence that settled wasn't awkward. It was the kind born from something landing deep. Then Petra added, almost under her breath, tattoos aren't decoration. They're navigation, confession, the things you can't put in a report. She turned back toward the screen, though no one cared about the simulation anymore. Every gaze stayed locked on the ink, barely visible beneath her collar. For the first time since stepping into that hall, no one was counting how many marks she carried. They were realizing how little they truly understood. Commander Rourke stepped forward again, sensing the shift but choosing not to break it. She won't say this, he murmured. So I will. Petra stayed to the side, arms folded, letting silence be her shield. Rourke continued. Chief Vale once went 72 hours without food or sleep during an evasion op in the Mojave. Not training, real asset protection. She did it on a fractured ankle with the heat pushing 115. He moved slowly across the front, each word landing like a weight drop. Another time, she led 3 hostages barefoot through a minefield strewn with broken glass. One of them had been shot. She never raised her voice, never panicked, she just moved. Somewhere behind Rowan, a pen slipped off a desk and clattered to the floor. Nobody bent to grab it. Rourke turned toward her, then back to the room. She's trained SEAL candidates twice her size, Rangers with a stack of deployments, Marines who swore they already knew pain. And she did it without yelling, without theatrics, just presence. Rowan kept his eyes down. Lopez and Cade did too. Every recruit who'd laughed earlier had gone still. The energy had changed, not fear, not worship, just that quiet correction that comes when you realize you completely misread someone. Petra hadn't gloated, hadn't demanded respect. She didn't have to. Her restraint was louder than any rank or bravado. She swept her gaze across the room, slow and level. "I'm not here to impress you," she said. "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to teach you how to stay alive when your strength fails." Her tone never lifted. She said it like weather, simple fact. Each of you will face that moment. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but it'll come. And when it does, your muscles won't matter. Your gear won't matter. Only whether your mind and your heart can hold steady when everything else falls apart. No dramatics, no emphasis. She just turned back to the projector as the next slide clicked on. "Let's talk psychological failure," she said, beginning with stress decay at hour 36. No one blinked. They simply absorbed every word. The woman with too many tattoos was no longer defined by ink, only by the weight behind it. Another 40 minutes passed, but not a single recruit checked a watch. And when it wrapped, they didn't bolt for the hallway. No jokes, no chatter, just chairs scraping softly, bodies moving like they didn't want to disturb whatever truth had settled in the room. Petra packed her things quietly. A worn duffel, a notepad, nothing more. Every motion had that same controlled precision she carried through the entire day. Then, a voice sounded behind her. "Chief Vale." She turned to find Rowan standing there, shoulders squared, jaw tight, but his tone stripped of the swagger he'd carried earlier. It wasn't arrogance anymore, or even embarrassment, just the weight of someone realizing the distance between what he assumed and what was real. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I judged you wrong." Petra studied him for a moment. Steady, not unkind, just taking his measure. "You judge the paint," she replied, voice even. "Not the steel underneath." He nodded, hands at his sides, fingers twitching like he wasn't sure where to put them. "I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," she said. "You didn't ask." Lopez lingered a few feet back, trying to look casual. A handful of others stayed near the doorway, pretending to pack up but listening all the same. "I wasn't trying to," Rowan began, but she lifted a hand just enough to stop him. No force needed. "You don't have to explain," she said. "You're young, strong. You think you've already met the world." He swallowed hard. She went on. "But here's the truth. This job doesn't care about your speed, your charm, or how clean your file looks. It cares about who you are when all you've got left is instinct and choice." She stepped once toward him, close enough that her words landed without raising her voice. "And the moment you stop respecting the people beside you, the second you assume the loudest ones are the strongest, you put someone at risk. Maybe your teammate, maybe a civilian, maybe you." Rowan didn't respond. He couldn't. She didn't look away. "You'll learn or you won't," she said. "But if you plan on walking into rooms like this again, start paying attention to what people carry, not what they show." Then she stepped past him, not cold, not dismissive, just finished. He turned slightly as if searching for a final line, but nothing came. And somehow, that silence hit harder than any lecture. Most recruits had already filtered out. A few stayed near the exit, murmuring quietly, or staring at the floor, unsure how to name whatever this experience had turned into. Petra was halfway to the door, when a small, unsure voice rose from the middle row. "Chief," she turned. A young Navy recruit stood there, fresh out of academy, face still soft with youth under his buzz cut. He kept his eyes low, but his voice stayed steady. "Why, all of them. Really?" The room froze. Even those halfway out the door stopped. Petra looked down at her forearms. Faded symbols, rough lines, edges blurred from time and sun. She walked back to the front. No drama, just the soft echo of boots on concrete and the drone of the old AC overhead. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Because memory fades," she said. "Ink doesn't." No one shifted. She swept her eyes across the room, not picking anyone out, taking all of them in. Some marks show where I survived, she said. Some show where I failed. And some— her voice dipped, not from weakness, but from truth. Some keep the ones I lost close. There was no dramatics, no pause for effect, just honesty. She rolled her sleeve back down, the chaotic ink disappearing beneath the fabric like smoke fading into air. You won't understand today, she said softly. You're not meant to. You're still whole, still clean, still lucky. She reached for her duffel. But one day, she said softly, when the plan collapses, when your strength gives out, when the world stops caring what happens to you, you'll look down at your arms. Maybe they'll still be clean. Maybe they won't. She swung the duffel over her shoulder. Either way, you'll know exactly what you carry. And you'll understand why I wrote mine down. Then she turned and walked into the glow, spilling through the hallway glass. No salute, no farewell. Just the muted thud of boots on tile. Nobody followed. Nobody spoke. They simply watched her ink fade into the beam of sunlight and wondered how many stories they'd never be able to read. The room thinned out slowly. Not like after training, but like after a memorial. Quiet and scattered. Rowan stayed seated, elbows on his knees, hands hanging loose as if he'd dropped something heavy, and couldn't figure out how to pick it up. He stared at the place where Petra had stood minutes earlier. Nothing remained, yet it felt like something still clung to the space. Weight, truth, presence. He had no idea what to do with any of it. Footsteps crunched nearby. Lopez eased onto the bench beside him with a long exhale. They stayed silent for a stretch, watching the last few recruits slip out the door. Then Lopez muttered, "You planning to apologize again tomorrow?" Rowan didn't lift his eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I am." He dragged a hand across the back of his neck, breath shaking out of him. "I thought she was some admin they brought in to check a box. Diversity optics or whatever." Lopez didn't respond. He didn't need to. Rowan kept going. "I looked at her and saw tattoos. That's it. Didn't even think to ask what they meant." Lopez gave a slow nod. "We all did." Rowan finally glanced up. But when she talked about that fallback trail, the blood, the markings, the map she carved into herself, he shook his head. That wasn't ink. That was survival. Lopez leaned forward, resting his arms on his thighs. "You ever meet someone who makes you feel like you haven't even earned the right to lace your own boots?" Rowan let out a short, empty laugh. "Just did." They sank into silence again, not from awkwardness, but because nothing they said now was for show. No jokes left to patch up their pride. No swagger to hide behind. Only honesty. Rowan rose slowly, lifting his canteen strap over his shoulder. "Next time she teaches," he said, "I'm sitting in the front." Lopez lifted a brow. "Thought you hated lectures." "I do," Rowan said. "But I've never seen someone walk into a room and change the entire atmosphere without raising their voice." At the doorway, Rowan paused, glancing back one more time at that same patch of floor, the same benches, same scuffed concrete, now carrying a meaning he'd been blind to before. "Too many tattoos," he murmured. "God, I had no idea." Then he stepped out, quieter than he'd entered. Same boots, different man. And now it's your turn. How many of your scars carry stories no one else knows? Ever judge someone by nothing more than what you saw? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. If you stand with quiet strength, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you won't miss tomorrow's story on Major Tom's Tales. Share this with someone who still thinks appearances tell the whole truth. Watch the videos appearing on your screen, and we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, new story. Stay sharp, stay grounded.